Hey, Mike with Nerd Problems Gaming here, and today's video I'll be covering a new Nintendo Switch eShop sale and 10 more games worth buying, so let's get into it. The first game on today's list is BPM, or Bullets Per Minute. And so this game is really a unique combination of different genres where it combines a rhythm-based game with a roguelike first-person shooter. And so again, it kind of feels like a combination of retro Doom games and DDR, Dance Dance Revolution. And so in this game, you're defending the kingdom of Asgard from demon hordes that are invading. And so you'll have a bunch of different characters that you can choose from. You'll start off with just one, but each one of these characters has their own unique play style. But as you play through the game, you'll unlock additional characters you can play with, adding to the replay value. So like I mentioned, it is a roguelike game, so you're going to likely die a lot. And for me, it did take some time to really get used to the controls because again, it is more that rhythm-based game. There is sort of like a metronome in the middle of the screen that gives you an indication of when you can act, but you'll be able to shoot and dash and reload, jump and more, in line with the beats, which is really cool. And so like I mentioned, it's a little bit challenging to get the hang of it, but once you do, it's super satisfying and it's really a lot of fun to be shooting enemies, flying around the screen, all to the sound of the music. It's got some crazy hard metal as well. And so it really brings that first-person shooter and rhythm-based games together in a really cool combination. And so you'll have an overall mini-map that shows you where you're moving throughout the dungeons. You'll encounter things like shops, upgrade areas, treasure rooms, monster arenas, and more. And as you explore the dungeons, you'll find items that can power up your character, new weapons, and different areas that you can boost your stats permanently, assisting you throughout the run. The game is a really cool concept, and if you find it a little too challenging to play to the beat, there is an option to turn that setting off, so it functions more like a traditional first-person shooter, but with those additional roguelike elements. It has a really unique art style as well. Everything kind of has a red tinge to it, but you get used to it, and it fits well within the setting of the game. Overall, if you like first-person shooters, if you like rhythm-based games, this is really a cool combination of both and is worth checking out. The next game on today's list is Bite the Bullet. And so again, this is another really unique combination of gameplay styles, where it's a run-and-gun shooter meets roguelike RPG, where you're trying to eat everything in sight. And so it's kind of a run-and-gun and eat shooter. And so the general plot of the game is the world is struggling for survival after a massive food shortage, and scientists have got together and dug into some genetic engineering and basically made it possible for people to eat anything and everything. Unfortunately, that had some side effects and turned the majority of the population into mutated monsters. And so you're actually going across the world trying to defeat these monsters and mutants in hopes of saving the world. And you have this genetic ability as well where you can eat anything in sight. So again, it's that run and gun shooter, but you're trying to eat everything as well. And as you eat enemies, you get additional abilities, improving your weapons, improving your skills. And that's kind of how you build out your skill tree and abilities throughout the game as well. It's definitely a weird story and it's a lot of fun. There's a ton of different food puns throughout the game, and it becomes incredibly addictive as well. So if you're looking for a new roguelike run and gun shooter RPG with a really over-the-top fun concept, I think you'll enjoy this game as well. The next game on today's list is Shantae, Risky's Revenge Director's Cut. And so this game is a remake of one of the classic Shantae games. And this time around, you're playing as Shantae as she tries to stop a pirate, Risky Boots, from unsealing a magic lamp and unleashing its evil powers. And so you'll need to travel across the land collecting magic seals to prevent this from happening and to save the world. And so in general, the gameplay is a 2D action platformer meets Metroidvania. And so you'll have that element of exploration, and it has a cool art style, as well as a unique 2D, 3D environment, where you'll actually be able to jump between the foreground and background in different areas throughout the game. On top of that, you'll find a bunch of different abilities that you can upgrade, new powers that you can learn that help you transform into different animals, and much more. Now, since it is a remake of a classic Shantae game, it's not as expansive as maybe later entries into the series, but they really did some great enhancements graphically. It has a fun story, and so if you're looking for a more lighthearted, Metroidvania-style adventure, I think you'll like this game as well. The next game on today's list is Gaiden. And so this game is inspired by retro classics, and great series like Mega Man and Ninja Gaiden, and it's kind of a melding of both. And so this game is an incredibly challenging action platformer, and you'll play as ninja robots as they go on a quest to recover golden skulls that the evil robots have taken control of and are trying to destroy the world. And so again, it plays out very similar to classic Mega Man titles in the sense where you have a stage select option, you can choose a variety of stages to play from, and as you defeat the bosses, you'll gain new abilities that can help you defeat other bosses along the way. And the overall gameplay, though, plays very similar to classic Ninja Gaiden titles. So you'll be able to slash and jump and dash, glide across the screen, do downward thrust attacks to bounce off enemies, and much more as you explore the different levels. They are incredibly fast paced, and I would definitely recommend playing on the easy mode if you're playing for the first time, just to really get the hang of the levels and the layout of the game, as the harder difficulties can get pretty brutal. Basically, you'll gain power-ups as you go throughout the level, and on the harder difficulties, if you happen to get hit, you'll lose those powers right away. And so it's obviously a lot easier to play on easy mode. Where that's not the case, you can keep your power-ups as you go along, till you get better at the game and understand the layouts, and then you can take on those harder challenges. Now, another interesting concept to the game is that it rewards you for speed. And so depending on how long you take to clear the level, it actually will power up the boss fight at the end of the level, where they get stronger the longer it takes you to clear the level. And so the game definitely rewards speed, making it easier, but again, that comes with playing the game multiple times through. I've said it a few times, but it is very challenging, but if you like those retro style games like Mega Man and Ninja Gaiden, this is an awesome melding of both, and I think is worth checking out. The next game on today's list is Siberian, the Time-Traveling Warrior. And so again, this is a very unique, fun concept where you play as a barbarian from the ancient past that travels through time to a dystopian future to take on an evil, corrupt government that's oppressing its people. And so again, it's a challenging, retro-inspired action platformer, and you'll take on 4 brutally difficult levels, and you're really going to need to have to master your sword abilities, like throwing your sword, a 3-hit combo, and a dash to make it through this game. It has really fun, challenging bosses and a great old-school feel. Kind of feels like an old-school action arcade game. As I mentioned, it's very challenging, but it does have unlimited continues, so you'll likely need to play through a few times to really get the hang of it if you hope to clear the game. It's not super long, it's probably only going to take you a few hours to beat it, but at this price, I think it's a steal and worth picking up. The next game on today's list is Evil Tonight. And so I covered this game a while back on the channel, but I really enjoyed it, and now that it's on sale again, I have to mention it again. Now, the overall style of the game is more of a 16-bit retro survival horror game, and so it's kind of like if a Resident Evil game came out on the Super Nintendo or the Game Boy Advance. And so in this game, you'll play as Sylvia, who is a medium that's investigating a haunting at an old performing arts school. And so along the way, she actually gets sucked into another dimension with some other students as she's exploring this school haunting. And so once you enter this alternate dimension, you'll be exploring the school, taking on crazy monsters, and unraveling the mystery of what happened and why it's being haunted. And so it is more of like an action game mixed with a lot of different puzzle elements. And so it does have that old school Resident Evil feel where you'll be able to explore some of the school, but there'll be a lot of different locked doors that you don't have access to. But as you progress, you'll be able to find different puzzles, clear them, get key items, find keys that you can open these unlocked doors, and fully explore the school and unravel the mystery of what's going on. And so along the way, you'll also find a bunch of different weapons like handguns, shotguns, crossbows, and more. But there's definitely limited ammo hidden throughout the game, as well as limited resources to heal your character. So while the graphics aren't really scary per se, it does have that horror theme. But I think where the intensity really comes into play is taking out these enemies. Often there'll be a lot on screen at the same time, and the overall need to really manage your ammunition effectively if you hope to survive throughout the game. You do have a knife attack that can be used unlimited, so I found myself using that a lot throughout the game to take out certain enemies and to conserve ammo to save them up for the challenging boss fights. I really enjoyed this game, I had a blast with it, And if you like survival horror games, old school Resident Evil style games, with a cool 16-bit art style, I definitely recommend picking this one up as well. The next game on today's list is Resident Evil Revelations. And so this game is another survival horror game, this time in the Resident Evil franchise. And this game takes place between Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 5. And so the general story of the game in this one is that a new terrorist organization has recently attacked a major city with bioweapons. And now instead of just attacking a city, they're threatening the entire world. And so you'll play as Jill Valentine and her partner, as well as Chris Redfield and his new partner, as they try and take down this new terrorist organization after the events of the downfall of the Umbrella Corporation. And so one thing that really makes this game unique is that the majority of it actually takes place on a cruise ship. And I thought that was a really cool concept, where a lot of Resident Evil games you're playing through like a mansion or underground labs. But this time around you're completely trapped within a giant cruise ship. And so I thought that was really cool. There's no escape and you're surrounded by bioweapons everywhere. And so that definitely ups the intensity of the game. And so as you play through, you'll kind of play in different chapters where you'll go back and forth between playing as Jill and her partner and then jumping back to Chris and his new partner. And so that was a really interesting change, where a lot of Resident Evil games up to this point, you would basically play as one character the whole way through and then potentially unlock a new character to play through on your second playthrough, kind of experiencing their half of the story, where this time around you jump back and forth between the sets of characters. And on top of that, the game became a little bit more fast-paced, where you're not necessarily going to have to be going into the menu all the time to be switching weapons and healing your character. They've mapped that to the D-pad and different buttons around the controller. And so I think that also increases the intensity of the game because you don't have those breaks all the time. And so again, it makes it a little bit more action focused than some of the previous Resident Evil titles. It doesn't have the extensive upgrade system like Resident Evil 4, where you're earning coins throughout the game to upgrade your weapons, but you do find a bunch of different parts scattered throughout the game that you can equip to your weapons, giving them a little bit different feel. So it might be things like enhanced reload speed, doing more damage, and much more. Another really cool element to the game is the raid mode. And so this is like little missions in different areas that you experience throughout the game, but this time around you're taking on different challenges where you need to defeat a number of enemies, and they all have health points. And so it's almost like a Resident Evil game meets RPG, and as you progress you'll earn points that can help you unlock new abilities for your character, enhancing your weapons, unlocking new characters, and much more. And so this was a lot of fun, taking on these additional challenges in this raid mode, and really added to the longevity of the game. But it's definitely one of my favorite Resident Evil games in recent years. So if you haven't played Resident Evil Revelations, I definitely recommend it. The next game on today's list is Blossom Tales: The Sleeping King. And so this game is an action-adventure game, very similar to classic titles like The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, and other games in the Zelda series from the Game Boy Advance. And so it follows that action-adventure dungeon crawling formula, but this time around it follows a fun story where you're actually playing along in a story that a grandpa is telling his grandchildren as a bedtime story. And so in this game, you'll play as Lily, a young knight to the kingdom that goes on a quest to save the kingdom after the king's evil brother has overthrown the kingdom and placed the king under a spell that has put him under a deep sleep. And so you'll explore the kingdom, searching for different ingredients that you can use to revive the king and save the kingdom. And so similar to other classic Zelda titles, as I mentioned, you'll be exploring dungeons around the world, finding different items as you play, which can help you take out the bosses and explore the dungeons further. So you'll encounter classic items for things like a boomerang, bow and arrow, a hookshot-like item, and much more. And so if you do like those classic Zelda titles, this one fits right in. And so another cool aspect with the story is that it will continually break the fourth wall, and the grandkids will pitch in their ideas of what's going on and their thoughts of the story throughout the game, which is a lot of fun. Some of the puzzles can get pretty challenging in the game, but outside of that, the game isn't too terribly difficult. I think it's definitely geared more towards a younger audience in that sense, where I think by the end of the game I had something like 30 potions I could use to completely heal my character and revive myself multiple times if I needed to. So there wasn't really that intensity at the end of the game. I didn't really have any fear that I was going to beat it. So I think it could be a great entry point for younger players in this type of genre. But at the same time, even though it was very easy in that sense, I still had a lot of fun with it. But if you like classic adventure games and early titles from the Legend of Zelda series, I definitely recommend it. The next game on today's list is Doom. Now you've probably heard of Doom before, but in the game you play as Doom Guy, who's a beefed up space marine that takes on the minions of Hell. And so the general story of this game is that an outpost deep in space has been using a technology to access portals to Hell in hopes of using it for energy, but this obviously gets out of hand very quickly and ends up opening portals from Hell to the real world. And so demons are terrorizing the world now, and you go on a quest to stop them and prevent them from escaping from Hell. And so for me, I don't really play a ton of multiplayer first-person shooter games. It's never really been my thing. And I always have really enjoyed great single-player first-person shooter stories. But to be honest, these days that seems to be few and far between. But the Doom series has always been one of the best, and they really hit it out of the park on this game. And so there's a huge world to explore, a lot of different secrets, challenging enemies, and it's definitely one of the most fast-paced first-person shooters I've ever played. It gets incredibly fun and addicting, a huge adrenaline rush as there's music rocking in the background, enemies are attacking you from everywhere. You eventually get the abilities where you can punch enemies to death, rip them in half, and much more. So it's incredibly intense and super brutal, but it's also very satisfying killing these demons and blasting through the different levels. If you like first-person shooter games, this is one of my favorites of all time, and I definitely recommend it. The final game on today's list is the Mega Man Zero ZX Legacy Collection. Now this game actually includes 6 games from the Mega Man Zero ZX series, and previously this series was really only released on different Nintendo handhelds, so it's coming out on systems like the Game Boy Advance and Nintendo DS. And they're incredibly challenging action platforming games, very similar to the Mega Man X series, but in my opinion a lot more difficult. And so this time around, for the majority of the games, you'll be playing as Zero with his Z-Saber. And so it's kind of more of a sword-based lightsaber combat versus more of the traditional range attacks that Mega Man is known for. But in the later games, you're actually able to play as both characters. And so in similar Mega Man fashion, you'll be able to choose from a variety of different levels, taking on bosses and acquiring their powers throughout the game. And so the series has that formula, but it has some light RPG elements to the game as well, where you're able to upgrade your character with a variety of abilities. But I think you'll definitely notice it's a very challenging action platformer. But thankfully there's some new accessibility modes that add some additional difficulty options to the game, making it easier if you choose. Or you can go that more challenging traditional route, as the games were when they were originally released. Another thing I really enjoyed about this collection is that you're able to play the game with modern controllers versus using the handheld gaming systems. The Mega Man X series is definitely known for some fast-paced action platforming, and they've brought that back into the Mega Man Zero ZX series. But for me, it was always a little bit challenging to play with these smaller handheld devices compared to your traditional controller. So I definitely enjoyed and appreciate having the option to play with that Pro Controller on the Switch. I think it makes these games a lot more accessible and fun. And then they also play a lot more like a traditional Mega Man X game, and so I really enjoy that as well. If you haven't played the Mega Man Zero ZX series before, this is an awesome collection and I definitely recommend it. But again, that wraps up our list of 10 new games worth buying in this latest Nintendo Switch eShop sale. If you like this video, be sure to hit that like button as it really helps out the channel. If you're going to pick up any of these games or have played them before, let us know your thoughts on the games in the comments below. And if you'd like to help support the channel, pick out content and more, consider becoming a patron of ours over at nerdproblemsgaming.com/Patreon. And if you like videos like this on video games, board games, and everything nerdy, check out one of our other videos here. And if you haven't done so yet, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell notifications to get the latest updates of new nerd videos we put out, and to make sure you don't miss out on any future sale videos so you can take advantage of these great deals. But once again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you more soon.